Jorge Lopez of the Mets has to be the biggest joke in baseball right now. I don't know if you guys have seen what he did, but to throw his glove out of anger into the crowd after being ejected, and then on top of that, the cherry on top is I'm going to go in front of the reporters and say I play with the effing blank worst team in all of baseball, insinuating the Mets, and because of that, the Mets are releasing him as of tomorrow. And it's like, do you know how hard it is to make it to the majors? We've talked about it here before, and it is a very, very slim chance. I mean, the average span, if you count all of minor leagues, you count every single player there is, including the minor league players, average time in the major leagues is one season. So there are a lot of people who do not make it to the majors. They are stuck in the minors their entire careers. And this guy pretty much probably threw his career out of anger. So what a joke. What a joke. If you guys haven't seen that, check that out. Um, the Florida Panthers tie up the series, and shocking factor, overtime once again against the New York Rangers. The Minnesota Timberwolves avoid another sweep in the playoffs, and our boy Scotty Scheffler is free. Yes, you heard that correct. He is free. All criminal charges have been dropped against him. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I'm your host, Matthew Raridan, and with me today are both of my co-hosts. First, we've got David Street,
What's up, y'all?
and secondly, we've got Ed Smith.
Hook 'em.
Guys, the Florida Panthers, they finally won this overtime game against the New York Rangers in iconic fashion. If anyone's going to be involved, it's got to be Barkov. I mean, I'm going to foreshadow a little bit here. We're going to talk a lot about Barkov, not only in today's episode, but probably throughout the rest of this series because Barkov is just a beast. But yes, the New York Rangers, they were up 2-1 in the series, and they were hoping to, eventually go up 3-1, especially on enemy territory. But they weren't able to get the job done. Did go to overtime, but one of these teams are bound to score. That's pretty much been this whole series in a nutshell, is that these two teams are just so great at what they do, but they always seem to tie. It always seems to go into overtime. They are giving it their all, but somebody's got to give. And it's tough when you see the goalie matchup between these two teams that one of these goalies, unfortunately, is going to have to give it up. You can't play forever, even though both these goalies probably could go on quite a marathon of not allowing goals. But, guys, I want to talk about this. Shesterkin for the Rangers. He can only do so much on his own, right? He needs a little bit more help from the Rangers. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but you look at them and you got to wonder, like, how on earth are the Panthers not ahead in this series? Because for one, they're way ahead of the Rangers. I think in shot attempts, it should be 3-1. Hell, maybe a Panther sweep, but obviously, give credit to Shesterkin, who obviously is far and away the main reason why the Rangers are still in the series against the Panthers.
Well, I do have the stat in front of me. Shosturkin has faced 130 shot attempts with a 923 save percentage. That is keeping your team in it. It's a
Yeah,
better save percentage than Bobrovsky has at 910, but it's 30 fewer shots in 4 games. That is a tremendous number. And you got to think that the Rangers have to make an adjustment to put at least somebody in front of the goal to help them not have to take on so much.
Yeah, I mean, like you just said it there, 130 shot attempts in 4 games. That's over 30 shot attempts a game on average that he's having to face. It's an onslaught what this Florida Panthers team is doing against the Rangers.
And also, but like you talk about adjustments, and yeah, obviously adjustments are important, but at the same time, you have to wonder like, is there even anything you can do? Like Matthew, I remember when our hockey teams faced each other in 2016 in the Eastern Conference Finals, and you guys just outshot the crap out of us. And I'm sure Cooper made adjustments. He's phenomenal at making adjustments, but I think sometimes it's just a matter of they're like when the other team is just peppering a bunch of shots at you, there's really not a whole lot you can do there.
There's not, but I'm glad you brought up the Penguins because we've talked about the series of the Penguins just 2 years ago when I want to say, was it 72 shot attempts in one game? Shesterkin has shown that he can take all these goals. He really can, these attempts on the goals. But there's only so much he could do. Your offense needs to give in. And we've talked about where is their strength. It's within power play. And that's where they're struggling now is that power play efficiency. So the offense needs to pick it up. They need to figure out something on these lines because Florida is honestly just too much for them to handle. And it's lucky that it's even that the series is tied 2-2 right now because Florida could easily be further ahead, just like you said, David. But on the other side of the ice, Bobrovsky, he's no slump either. I mean, this guy here, if it wasn't for Shesterkin, we would be talking more about Bobrovsky because of what he's doing in the net too. 91% save percentage. He's has taken on 100 attempts, so he is still taking on some attempts. Not as much as Igor Shesterkin, but Bobrovsky is still keeping them in the game enough for them to. It's every game is being pretty much to the wire. It's very close each game, just like last night going in overtime. But I mentioned the name earlier, and that is Alexander Barkov for the Florida Panthers. And David, when you see Barkov out there, is there a player that you could compare him to of someone that's just constantly a reminder of just how good they are pretty much each game, not to forget about them?
Well, there's a few guys: Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid. Guys like that.
Yeah, Barkov to me, he's definitely a great comp is Ov because he's physical. He's doing so much, whether it's him scoring the goals, which is a nightmare to have to even put up with, just like Ovechkin with his one timers. But he's also dishing it out too, and he's creating so many plays. Last night, I mean, his assist that he had, was it in the second? I think it was in the second that it was just beautiful, such a perfect pass, and it's like this guy's more than just a goal scorer. He's doing everything for their team, and there's a reason why he's the captain.
Now, what was it? Was it Barkov who had almost 60 goals, or was that his teammate Reinhart?
I think it was Reinhardt.
Okay.
I think it was Reinhardt. It's just Barkov is just more of an overall. He's been overall player, but he's creating so much for this team right now. Verhaeghe, everything. I mean, Carter Verhaeghe is scoring like no other. One name that you're not really hearing about is Matthew Tocek. Yeah, not Tocek. That's Vincent Tocek. Sorry, Tkachuk.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because last year that's all we heard. It seemed like was Matthew
Yeah.
Tkachuk, and now this year it's not. But that could be such a great recipe for success for them. Ed, what are you seeing coming from the Panthers side? That do they even really need to change anything? Oh, Ed, I think you may be on mute, possibly.
I
There you are.
There we go. You got me?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
What I've seen from the Panthers is they've been very physical up front, but they have just thrown shot after shot after shot whenever they get an opportunity. It isn't a pass around. It isn't sliding in front of the goal. It isn't getting to the other side, switching off, that type of thing. It is 100% attack, attack, attack. And you mentioned Kachuk, and what I've seen from him is he's been pretty much involved everywhere. It's not that he's only setting people up. It's not that he's only scoring goals. It's not that he's starting the plays. He is doing all of it, and maybe not at the top level of like Verhaeghe's got the most points. Kachuk's right there. You got Verhaeghe having the most shots, and he's Kachuk is not throwing as many shots, but he's just right there. Not as many assists, just right there. It's one thing to be the best option for one specific thing, but he is a good option for a lot of things when he's on the ice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, there was a reason that we talked. Our Chuck's name was thrown around a lot last year. It's almost like this year it was almost expected because of how much he did last year in the Stanley Cup playoffs. That it's just the expectation now. So good for Kachuk and good for this Florida Panthers team because they are dominating in a lot of the aspects. But the Rangers, if they want to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, they're going to need to go into a higher gear, especially on offense, because it's going to be tough to keep up with this Florida Panthers team.
And it's also the power plays that Florida's just really taking advantage of right now.
Oh, absolutely. Where we talked about before, it was normally the Rangers that were taking advantage of these power plays. So we talked about last night, momentum. So many things could shift and change where that was the Rangers' key momentum was their power plays. Well, now it's the Panthers. As well, last night in the Western Conference Final in NBA took place. The Mavericks looked to go for the full sweep, being on their home court, and they couldn't do it. The Timberwolves, they stood tall, and they had their back against the wall, and they performed great. I do want to add, Luka is a freak. He does need to work on his free throw shots because that 4-point play of what it could have been last night could have possibly changed a little bit, but he missed his free throw. And I think from that point on, it just pretty much took a turn for the worse the rest of the game. Even though I say rest of the game, it was only a minute or so less of the game. But nonetheless, Luka is a freak. But I saw something last night that was impressive to me, and that was Anthony Edwards' shot at the end. It was just a 2-pointer, but just when the Mavericks felt like they had that momentum coming their way, Anthony Edwards was able to hit a nice clutch shot, and I feel like we haven't been able to see Anthony Edwards with that kind of clutch shot, especially in this series. It seems like he's turned the ball over a lot when they really need him to be clutch, and this was a nice basket that did stretch their lead just a little bit more and kind of made it too far out of reach, because after that play was the Luka play where he went for the 4-point play and missed the free throw. So Mavericks, they did give up the game. Is this the momentum the Timberwolves needed?
I mean, in a way, yeah, because obviously they needed a win to start this kind of momentum.
Well, with Anthony Edwards, his attitude is not what I would see from, say, a LeBron that is very passive and very, oh, we'll get him next time. He was basically coming out and saying, there is no way that I'm going to sit here and tell you that we're going to lose this in any way, shape, or form. We're going to go out and win this. And that is an attitude that I've seen from these lineage of great players. That attitude of, I don't care what's going on around me, we will succeed, and I will make sure that this is going to happen. And if it doesn't, it doesn't, but I'm not going to concede in any way, shape, or form. And that's something that I remember seeing with Bird, with Magic, with Isaiah Thomas, with Jordan, with Kobe, with Allen Iverson. I mean, that is just something that I'm not seeing as much around the league right now, that unwavering, I am the man, I'm going to make sure that this happens. Don't get in my way because I will go over you. That type of thing. And that's something that will propel him to be one of the faces of the NBA, like we've talked about.
I don't think you're wrong at all, Ed. But in fairness, there is also, I think, a difference between a near 40-year-old who's pretty much already accomplished everything in his career and a 22-year-old who's just entering the prime of his career and really hasn't accomplished anything yet. Like the difference in hunger and attitude is going to be different.
That I get what you're saying on that, but that has been the attitude that LeBron had when he went to Miami. He was like, "Oh well, this is Dwayne Wade's team. Not going to step on any toes here." Well, Dwayne Wade had to go to LeBron and go, "This is your team. You helped put this together. This is your team." Otherwise, LeBron would not have taken the lead that he did.
Yeah, that's fair for sure.
Yeah, and people will say, there's a fine line between cockiness and confident. But in this situation, Anthony Edwards is both. And that's not a dig. That's not a dig whatsoever because back in the day, you tell Larry Bird he was cocky, that's a compliment. You tell him he's confident, that's not a compliment. It's almost like that's what's going to feed into him more is both of those things are true, cocky and confident. And that's exactly what Anthony Edwards is because you can't go into this game saying, well, the odds are against us. We'll be lucky to make it to a game 7. No, you're going to go into this game telling your team, we're going to win this game. Because if you don't, you've already lost. You've given up. And yes, I get odds may not be on their side and they could lose next game. Shoot, or they could win the next 3. We don't know. But to have that confidence that he has is it just like Ed said, it kind of has that reminiscence of what we've seen before in some of the
Well,
stars.
Well, the other thing too is, listen, the players and coaches are probably not worried, but the Wolves fans probably are worried because, as we all know, no NBA team has ever won a playoff series being down 3-0. Now there have been instances where a team was down 3-0 and they were able to come all the way back to tie it, which is exactly what the Celtics did against the Miami Heat last year in the Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics were down 3-0 and then they stormed all the way back to tie the series. Ultimately, they lost. So it has happened before where a team was down 3-0 and then they tied it. And when you look at the Timberwolves all season long, they've been the best defensive team. They got good pieces. They have Anthony Davis. And they got a lot of good players around him. So
Gobert. Yeah.
yeah, but Gobert is also kind of well, okay. He is Gobert at the end.
Defensive wise.
Yeah, he is Gobert at the end of the day, I guess. I don't know. But the point I'm trying to say is that when you talk about who could be the first team to overcome a 3-0 deficit, it could be the Timberwolves because I think statistically, overall, they are a better team than than the Mavericks. I mean, we have to remember that there was a very good chance that Minnesota could have been the number 1 seeded team. And of course, if they didn't get it, they ended up getting a 3 seed, but they were almost there. So yeah, if any team can be the first to overcome a 3-0 deficit and win the series, I don't think anybody would be surprised if the Wolves are that team.
Well, I mean, the second to last day of the regular season, it was a 3-way tied for the 1 seed between OKC, the Wolves, and Denver. Similar to kind of what we talked about yesterday with hockey too. I mean, for the President's Trophy. So, but yes, this Timberwolves team was that close to being a number 1 seed. And this series, guys, kind of reminds us a little bit of a series that took place in the first round, and that's the Denver Nuggets and the LA Lakers. The Lakers led most of the time, similar to Minnesota has led most of the time in this series. 112 minutes, the Wolves have had the lead, whereas Dallas has only had the lead for 90 minutes. So, David, you talked about this actually a lot with the Lakers and Nuggets series, that the Lakers, they actually looked like they were the better team. This didn't look like the Nuggets team we're used to seeing, and the Lakers led most of the time. So, is this David? Do you see this being kind of similar to that series?
Yeah, and you know what that means. I guess it means that the Wolves are going to win the series, right? Yeah. Also, the other while we're still on this topic, I want to know Has there been any team in the NBA that has had more luck with European players than the Dallas Mavericks? Because to go from Dirk Nowitzki to Luka Doncic is just so unfair, man.
And don't forget, I mean, they also did have Porzingis too at one point.
Yeah, yeah,
So
Steve Nash, the Canadian.
the Canadian,
yeah.
hey, we said Europeans, no, but
They
but
speak
yes,
French. It's-
yeah, the queen, right? But yeah, you're absolutely right. Dirk Nowitzki was probably one of the most underrated players of all time. Dirk Nowitzki was an amazing player. That fadeaway was untouchable, similar to Kareem's hook. It's just Dirk Nowitzki was really, what's the word I could use for it? It's almost like a revolutionist because he brought a lot of relevance. I feel
Mhm.
like to the league from the European side. Now we see it filled with a lot of star players. Hence Jokic, who is a three-time MVP now. So the league is well represented with the Europeans. But yes, Dallas Mavericks specifically with Dirk and now Luka, they know what they're looking for. They have a type.
Yeah, well, it also helps when the Sacramento Kings are, no offense, Matthew, morons, and they pick Bagley over Luca.
Hey, that's because Luca threatened us that if we were to draft him, he would have stayed in Europe for another like 2 or 3 years. He did not.
Seriously?
Yeah, he did not want to be a king, which I thought was so funny because I'm like, you would have thought Vladi would have worked his Serbian magic and got him over, but
Yeah.
apparently Vladi could not. But yeah, that was one of the big issues. But I still would have drafted him. Who cares? I mean, where's Bagley now? Probably not on an NBA team, but we have definitely drafted a lot of really bad players over time. But yeah, Luka's a freak, and what he's doing for the Mavericks and for the NBA is amazing because he's still continuing to bring Europe into the NBA. But let's see here. The MLB. This is another important topic that I want to talk about, and I know we all have several things to say about it. The MLB has now brought in the Negro League stats. They are including them into the MLB stats, and there has been changes because of that. One of the biggest changes, which has been talked about probably this whole day, is well, the MLB now has a new batting average leader of all time. Where it was Ty Cobb before at a 367, it is now Josh Gibson at a 372 batting average. So he officially surpasses Ty Cobb because the Negro League stats is now included in the MLB stats. Ed, is this righting wrong, or how do you feel about this move?
I This is a something that the MLB is doing to try and promote the fact that they did have these leagues of players that could not play in the MLB based upon their regionality at the time of Jim Crow laws. You know,
Segregation, yeah.
these types of things that kept the Negro League players out of the MLB. Now, there were some of the players from the Negro Leagues that did play in the MLB and did very well. Uh, you know, Satchel Paige made it to the MLB late in his career, so he didn't have a lot of stats before this inclusion of his stats in that league. So I don't think it's righting or wrong. I think it is including players that most people would not know anything about. That is a part of baseball history. I'm not saying that it's part of MLB history, it's a part of baseball history. That's where it gets a little murky in my mind to try and add the averages and home runs and RBIs and all these stats from these other leagues and say that it's going to be included in the same level as what same weight as what MLB stats provide.
Yeah, and I'm
David,
hope.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not really an expert when it comes to baseball history, so I feel like you'll do a good job of helping me out here. But was the Negro League created because black players at the time like actually weren't able to get access to Major League Baseball? If that's the case, then I guess I can kind of understand where MLB is coming from.
Yeah, it was a league that was created for uh, for traveling teams and, like I said, areas in which the African American community could not uh, have players get raised into the farm system of MLB teams. So they created their own league, so they could have their traveling, their ability to play ball professionally through their own league, as opposed to being shut out because of racist owners, because of racist cities. We look at Brooklyn and Jackie Robinson. Well, do we really consider Brooklyn to have been one of the most racist cities in America? No. They were one of the most inclusive cities in America. But when you start heading west during that time period, that's when you started to see more ownership groups, more owners that had way more control during that time period of baseball, really shut out anybody that was not of the same skin color as the ownership.
Got you.
Yeah, and Ed, you brought up great points as far as maybe not carrying the full weight, and this is meaning no disrespect whatsoever to the Negro League and the players that played in the Negro League. It's almost similar to saying, well, you bring Kurt Warner stats from the CFL over to the NFL. That's kind of like a similarity there, but the Negro League was a necessity.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming from me here, is that it was a necessity of what needed to happen. And I'm totally fine with integrating their stats because, like Ed said also, that this is a baseball thing. It's not an MLB. This is a baseball, stats here. And so having that brought over, I get why they did it. I really do. But it does change the record holders now. If you want, you can't really. I wouldn't consider it the MLB record holders. This is the baseball record holders essentially now. And once again, that's no disrespect, but I think that is the best way to portray it. And Josh Gibson is the record holder in baseball for having the now leading batting average of all time. And Ed, do you have some other stats in comparison to Josh Gibson and Ty
I
Cobb?
I do, and one thing I want to keep in mind is Ty Cobb had a lot higher volume of games played, so his overall collective of hits and RBIs is going to be much greater. But when you look at percentages, that's the most fair, if you will, when it comes to that. Uh, Now, batting average, Josh Gibson, 373 versus 366. OBP, 458 versus 433. Slugging percentage, 718 versus 512. OPS, 1.176 versus 0.944. OPS plus, 214 versus 168. All that in Josh Gibson's favor. Uh, Josh Gibson did have more home runs, 166 versus 117. Because as we know, Ty Cobb was more of a singles hitter and then get around the bases by spiking every other player on the way home. They're both in the Hall of Fame already. Josh Gibson did have 2 championships and 12 All-Star appearances in the Negro League versus Ty Cobb's 1 MVP and 12 batting titles in Major League Baseball. When we look at the WAR, wins above replacement, here's where the separation truly is truly there. Ty Cobb had 151.5 wins above replacement. Josh Gibson had 38.1. that is a tremendous chasm between those two players. But by introducing the Negro League stats to have as much weight as MLB stats, now Josh Gibson is being heralded as the all-time hit king uh, on average wise. And I see why they're doing that, but it wasn't against the same competition of pitching that Ty Cobb did, because it was a lot of traveling exhibition type games, things like, I'm not going to say Savannah Bananas, but they did a lot of promoting to try and get people out to the ballpark to come see them so they could keep playing. Whereas Major League Baseball is Major League Baseball. There's at especially that time in this country, there was no sport above it at that point. So it isn't like now where NFL is king. Uh, Major League Baseball was the king at that time.
I just want to add something just a little funny. Ed, you talk about war, and I tell you what, there ain't nothing that baseball nerds love more than war. Hey, check out this player. But what about his war? What's his war like?
Yeah, war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. But yeah, seriously though, that seems to be always the talk now is wins above replacement, and it is always the talk now when it goes to comparing players. And you see there, like Ed said, the big difference there is in WAR between the two players. And I really want to hone in on what Ed's saying, because I don't want anybody to think we are disrespecting whatsoever the Negro League. Because if you want to compare, almost you could compare possibly, let's say, junior college in football versus a D1 school in college football. Just because you may be on a junior college team does not mean that you aren't as talented as someone who may be on the D1 team. But there's a reason why they're on the D1 team. It is the standard. MLB at that time was the standard, and it was a greater league with a lot of greater and even level playing field with those players. So that's what, I'm sure Ed will agree. That's what he was getting at, and that's what I want to get at too, is because there's no disrespect there whatsoever, because we saw some incredible players, including Josh Gibson, come from the Negro League and have success.
I mean, if we want to take this a little bit different direction to help drive the point home, there's baseball leagues all around the world. Mm-hmm. The leagues that Ohtani and Ichiro came from. People still have the argument that Ichiro is the all-time hit king because they're including his baseball stats from the how do you pronounce it? Nippon?
Yeah.
Nippon,
yeah.
Nippon League.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. But when you take a look at MLB, Pete Rose is the all-time hit king. Mm-hmm. And that should be undisputable whatsoever. But you have baseball nerds that are out there trying to include stats from not MLB into that overall resume that Ichiro has, and trying to put him above Pete Rose, and it's just not right. You cannot put Ichiro's time in that league at the same weight as his time in the MLB. And that's really all I'm getting at as far as carrying the weight of the stats, trying to be equal. This feels like an equity play, and it's the quality of players in the Negro League. I would put probably at AAA, somewhere in that level. It's not Major League Baseball, because while there were several players from the Negro League that had a lot of success, including MVPs in Major League Baseball, not every player was at that level. Just because you were one doesn't mean that you're always the other, and just because you were the other doesn't mean that you were one. It doesn't coordinate when you try and mash those two things together.
Well, whoever dog that was that barked, I'm sure he or she wants to add to the conversation.
Yeah, and it's an argument that will just kind of go on for a while. I'm talking about like the hits, the Ichiro conversation and Pete Rose, very similar to. I still hear till this day the Joe Montana arguments of being the greatest quarterback of all time because of the different eras, and of course we always hear the LeBron and Michael Jordan comparisons. It's the argument that will go on till the end of time because you have two difference of opinions. So same thing could be applied when you hear the Ichiro conversation and Pete Rose and the Negro League and the Major League Baseball. But it was something that I think was a necessity and good for Major League Baseball for doing that. But now the door should be closed there. Don't try to get all NIL on us and open these doors and bring in, the KBO record books into the MLB now. And yeah, so let's just kind of keep it there. I'm in agreement with that.
I will say there is one thing that stat nerds love to do, and that's argue. And this brings up a whole new argument amongst all the stat nerds that are out there. And I try to be a stat nerd, but I can't remember that many numbers on anything.
There is nothing more annoying than when stat nerds, not just baseball, like any sport, will try to insist that a player is not good because he sucks at like this one random stat that you just pulled out of your ass.
Well, that and social media. Social media, man. You're on social
Mm.
media, you're automatically right.
Yeah.
I'm right, you're wrong. It's that
I'm right,
mentality.
you're wrong.
It's that is social media right now. And speaking of social media, I don't think that I ever seen social media blow up more than I did when Scotty Scheffler got arrested in Louisville for the PGA Championship in Valhalla, and it has now been resolved. It has been announced today that Scotty Scheffler charges have been dropped by the Louisville Metro Police Department on all counts of the charges, and we kind of saw this happening, didn't we, guys? Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, when you we all saw the dash cam, or not dash cam, like we all saw the video, and you're looking at what's happening, and you're wondering like what happened. Did Scotty hurt this guy's feelings or something?
It really did seem like the officer in question, he was trying to make sense of an awkward traffic jam situation, and things just went a little sideways. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that Scotty Scheffler completely agreed, did not resist anything, just kind of went with everything, it was extra bonus points for him in the end, because if he did go the other way with that and go, don't you know who I am, we could be having a different discussion.
Yeah.
But with his attitude of it's just a big misunderstanding, we see the closed caption footage from across the street and see absolutely nothing happen that would necessitate any kind of charges being brought in the first place. This was just I think the cop was just upset that he was being overruled by somebody that was not him, and he wanted to make a statement in front of everybody.
I also want to add too, in that like you guys know who I'm going to talk about, but we have a friend who's actually employed by PGA who basically said that Scotty's younger sister was just totally calm, not worried at all, and that she basically knew that the charges were going to get dropped.
Scotty knew they were going to be dropped. I mean, that's how confident he was about it, and he should have been. That's why it got dropped. I like how Louisville Metro Police Department, the lieutenant, I think it was, pretty much talking about that they were somewhat backing up the police officers' actions in that situation. The first parts that led up to it, but at the same time saying, Mr. Scheffler was also right. It was a big misunderstanding, and the evidence that we've gathered shows that there was no burden of proof, and that the charges should be dropped. So, and that's exactly what happened.
And just to take this down the timeline, the actual court date that was set for him was supposed to be the 3rd. Well, Scotty Scheffler is already listed on the listed to tee off on June 6th at the Memorial Tournament, which is a signature event on tour. He was so confident that nothing was going to come of this that he already signed himself up, and he's going to be, on day one. There's nothing that was going to stop this from being just completely either thrown out or just laughed at by the judge.
Yeah, and also too, like, you have to think what an absolute jackass this officer is, because one, he had no business arresting Scotty Scheffler in the first place, but also two, he does absolutely nothing to help, anti-police rhetoric that we often get, in this country or so. So yeah, screw you, dude.
Yeah, nonetheless, it was still an unfortunate situation, and it overshadowed an unfortunate event that took place of someone losing their life just before that. And it's it, it's just tough, but nonetheless, it seemed like the correct decision was made, and the charges being dropped. Scotty Scheffler is free, which he was pretty adamant he was going to be free, and he's all set. He's ready for Memorial. If you got a little extra bucks hanging around, you may want to sprinkle it on a Scotty Scheffler dub that weekend, because things are looking good for him right now.
Okay, I just literally thought about this, so forgive me if I sound maybe a little incoherent. Scotty was calm throughout this entire process. And obviously, you can say, like, that's just Scotty, that's just who he is. But think about how much that actually ended up helping him. Because if Scotty was, resistant, if he was defiant, then you could argue that the officers, as wrong as they were, they would have a case to maybe, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, they still shouldn't have arrested Scotty because he did nothing wrong. But what I'm trying to say is that I think Scotty's naturally calm attitude helped him, because I think things would have taken a turn for the worse if he was being defiant and if he was being resistant and all that.
Cool heads prevail. I mean, there's a reason why that saying is a saying. I mean, he was cool, calm, and collected, and that did help his case, because he could have done things that were out of impulse and regrettable that could have made it worse. So, and it didn't for him. I mean, this is a guy who's a new father. I'm sure he has a different perspective at life now too because of that. I know Ed can attest to that. There's a different perspective you have once you have your first child, and just winning the Masters, and just, I mean, everything is now back to being fine with him because of these charges being dropped, but it didn't seem like he was really worrying regardless, because he knew where things stood. So, but yeah, Scotty Scheffler, charges dropped, and look for that Memorial Tournament that Ed's talking about, because he may be ready to win this one too, but not just because of this. Scotty Scheffler is the number one golfer in the world for a reason, because it could be his cool demeanor on on the course itself, or just he's just that damn good.
100%.
Yeah, but look forward to the next couple of days. We do have some more matchups within hockey, the Stars and Oilers. That's going to be something that I'm sure is talked about, as well as the next game of the Mavericks and the Timberwolves. I didn't realize till today, even though I've talked about it, it's Dallas and Dallas are well represented in the conference finals, both Western finals in the NHL and NBA. So that's big, and pay attention more to this New York Mets player, former New York Mets player now, Jorge Lopez, because it's a funny situation, because he really probably screwed over his career all in one night, and for the actions he did and the words that he said. I mean, maybe he's trying to be the next Kenny Powers. He does have the curly hair just like him, but there's only one Kenny Powers. So
it'll be really funny if he gets picked up by the White Sox.
Yeah.
By the way, you know what this whole like Dallas situation basically is? It's a real life version of you guys know that commercial, the one that goes, "I'm doing my part, I'm doing my part, I'm doing my part. I didn't do effing shit." And I think if you guys know that commercial, I
Yes,
think
they made a meme of Dallas teams using that.
Of course they did. Why wouldn't they?
It's already been done. They had the same mind as you, David. So hey, great minds think alike. So there's nothing wrong there. So the internet never fails to amaze me. I've said that for several years now. I see things that I'm like, how did someone come up with that? That is just it amazes me. So yeah,
Yeah.
internet, yeah, it will never, it always amazes me. But yeah, that's about all we have today, folks. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please continue to tune in and like and subscribe to our channel, share these videos, and of course in the comment section, do your worst. Let us know how you feel, how we're doing, and what you're liking about things, and of course your predictions. There is plenty of things to predict right now. I'm sure we're all going to predict a Scotty Scheffler dub after this court ruling, or these charges drop. But we'd like to hear your predictions as well. So go ahead and drop that in the comments section and continue to please support us because we really do appreciate that. But till next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.